Hello, everyone. It's Twanna here. And if you have landed in this space, then you probably know, especially if you've been following me, that I'm going to be telling you the 5 things that you need to know about the soloist or rugged individual type imposter syndrome. If it is your first time meeting me, I'm Dr. Twanna Carter, and as a career coach, I work with stressed, busy women executives who are plagued by the imposter syndrome, self criticism, and doubt. I work with them to alleviate their stress so that they can find peace of mind and fully focus on excelling those careers and enjoying what they spent time to build. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. I see a couple of you have dropped by. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining me live. And I'm going to hop over here to the comments. So if you have some comments, don't be afraid and don't hesitate to share them in the comments. I'll go over them while I am here. If you have questions while I'm live, I will answer your questions. And for those of you who catch this on the replay, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you too can ask questions. I don't know if it's down there, or over there, or over there, but ask questions because I always circle back to answer questions, right? So yes, I've done this series, right? And like I said, if you've been with me for the past 3 weeks, you know that this is the fourth one, right? And so definitely imposter syndrome really isn't just for CEO and high level or C-suite executives. It's actually a common experience, right? And for those of you who get new jobs or you're newly promoted into management or into the C-suite, you know that the imposter syndrome can kind of sneak up on you. And so that's why I've been talking about the imposter syndrome, right? Now, according to Dr. Valerie Young, who has actually spent a number of years doing some research, her first research that she did actually researched professional women who were mainly women of color. And she found her quest was to find out why so many high achieving women felt like frauds in their job, right? So we know that Dr. Imes and Dr. Clance are the first ones. They coined the term imposter syndrome. Actually, they called it imposter phenomenon, right? And then what Dr. Valerie Young came along and did is because most research is actually done on college folks, but Dr. Young studied professional women and she found that there were 5 types. 5 types, I'm doing 10, 5 on each hand, but 5 types of imposter syndrome. And that's what I've been doing. Okay. I've been going through each of the types, right? And so if you've missed it, let me tell you what you missed, right? I first talked about the perfectionist type of imposter syndrome. And then 2 weeks ago, I discussed the superwoman type of imposter syndrome. And then last week, I discussed the natural genius slash perfectionist type of imposter syndrome. And you know that today I'm talking about the soloist, right? And so if you want to catch those videos that I've already streamed and they're out there, stay tuned to the end. I will pop a link in the chat for you to view all of those videos in one place, right? So let's go ahead and get started. So we're talking about the soloist imposter syndrome. And I told you that imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon was a term coined way back in 1978. Now, there's a lot of research done on women, but what we know now is imposter syndrome can actually affect women as well as men. And what Dr. Young the reason why she wanted to research women of color, because a lot of women of color really struggle with this imposter syndrome. Okay. And so why do we need to know about imposter syndrome? Because it can have a negative effect on your career and your mental health and your relationships as well as your self-esteem, right? And if we don't attend to it, you don't get it taken care of, it can actually drop your self-confidence. And so that's why we talk about the imposter syndrome and we acknowledge it and then discuss ways on how you can turn that around. Okay. Because the imposter syndrome can really just affect your everyday life. Work is part of your life, the relationship is the other part. So it can affect your day-to-day living. Okay. So, what 5 facts? Because I told you I'm here to share 5 things with you about the soloist, what you need to know about the soloist type imposter syndrome. First off, I want to know how many people have heard. How many people knew that there are 5 different types of imposter syndrome? That's important to know, right? Because we say imposter syndrome, but I think when you drill down to the different types, or if you're like me, I'm real special. I have like 2, 3 of them all at one time, but that's okay. I finally figured out how to get around them, and that's the reason for me doing this particular series, right? And so we got a comment over here. So this Facebook user says, I suffer terribly from that. Yeah, a lot of people actually do, right? And I can say that from really high schoolish all through my college years and through my first leadership position, I struggled with imposter syndrome. Really, I did. I really struggled. And a lot of folks do. You heard me mention last week Shaka Khan, right? Who doesn't know Shaka Khan? But Shaka Khan said that when she did that song, she sang that song, I'm every moment woman, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, how talented you are, if you're an everyday person or you're a movie star, you're on Wall Street, you're not, anybody really can be affected by the imposter syndrome, right? So, first thing you need to know is that the soloist type or rugged individual, right? Rugged individual being the clues there, and soloist type. When you have this type of imposter syndrome, you actually believe you got to do everything by yourself. Everything. If you're putting together, let's say you're putting together a gigantic puzzle, right? You own the pieces, you got to put them in order, you got to figure out what fits, what doesn't fix, how to get stuff. You own everything, and your belief is, I have to do it all. Because if I don't do it all, I'm not competent. People are going to see me as competent. They're not just going to see me as a fraud, right? So that's fact number one, is the fact that you believe everything. You have to do it all by yourself. No help. No one can help you. Okay. Number two, women who suffer with soloist type imposter syndrome, they don't ask for help because she's afraid that if I ask for help, I will appear weak and incompetent. Right? So I said I own this one too. But you feel like if I ask any questions, I'm gonna look like I'm weak and that I don't belong here. Right? Number three, the fact that women are actually socialized to play small, I don't want to put anybody out. I don't want to ask people questions and interrupt them or disturb them, or I don't want to really be a bother to people. That really plays into the soloist type imposter syndrome, because you got to be confident enough to ask for questions, clarifying questions, ask when you need help. But women are sometimes socialized to play small. Like, I got to do it all by myself because I want to disturb people and I don't want to like bother people today, right? You got to kick that to the curb. So that was number three. Number four, right? You may also, especially this is important if you are a leader, you may really struggle with delegation, because I have to do it all myself and I got to do every single piece of all of it myself, or else people are going to see me as incompetent. And so your subordinates are like thumb twiddling, like, she's doing it all again. She's doing everything else. Or they could feel like you're doing their job and you're not training them because you don't trust them. Then you get little attitudes, right? And so, yes, if you have the soloist type imposter syndrome, you really struggle with delegating, tasks to people who are more than qualified to perform them, because you figure out, I got to do it all myself. I can't let anybody have any. I got to do it all myself. Right? And the fifth thing that you need to know about the soloist or rugged individual type imposter syndrome is that, when you do have a project and you have like felt like you're drowning, but I did all of it by myself. I did it. I made it. When you straggle across that finish line finally, and you complete the project and you're so tired, right? Then the negative thoughts start selling you. like, oh my God, I barely made it. They're gonna really think I'm incompetent because this is so hard for me. Oh my God, everybody's gonna know. They're gonna know I'm a fraud. They're gonna know I don't believe it. I don't belong here. I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. Because things were so hard, but they were only hard because you didn't delegate, because you didn't ask for help, right? And so, what are the tips? Because I told you what it is. What are some of the tips you can use to get over the soloist imposter syndrome? And I tell you, I really struggled with this one out of the gate, right? Part of it was because I grew up in poverty. So when I sat in the room, talking with folks who talked about they went golfing with their parents for the weekend, or they went skiing for the weekend, I would sit there in their room silent, because for me on the weekends, I was only worried about trying to find enough toilet tissue so my family would have toilet tissue through the weekend. Because sometimes that's how poor we were, right? It could really make you feel small when you're sitting at a table and people are discussing and sharing events and happenings that you have no clue about. Because, in my case, because we grew up in poverty. Yes, my dad was in the army, but we still grew up in poverty, right? So a lot of folks in the military that are still in poverty, people have this notion that if you're in the military, you're rich. No, that is not true. But so you can feel small coming out of the gate. And we'll talk about why that's important in a few moments, right? Because yes, some of imposter syndrome is a me thing. That was a me thing. I felt inferior. I felt like I wasn't as good as everybody else. So I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like a fraud sitting at the table with these people with such vast differences from me. We'll talk about why that's important in just a moment. So here's what you want. Here's what you need to know. You're talking about how to get around or get over the slowest type imposter syndrome, right? Number one, what you have to really ingrain into your mind that is that your aptitude is not synonymous, is not equal to your ability to know and do everything yourself, right? Your competency is not predicated upon that you know it all and you can do it all. That simply isn't true. Most days it's impossible to know it. It is impossible to know everything, right? And it's so funny, myself and other PhDs, we kind of laugh because oftentimes the slur that's slung our ways is that you know everything, you think you know everything. Those of us with PhDs understand it is not possible to know anything. When you get a PhD, you have added to the body of knowledge in a slim piece, like just the skosh. You add it to that body of knowledge, not all the knowledge that exists in the world, because it is impossible to know it all. And that's what you have to realize. Your competency, your worth is not predicated or equal to you knowing it all or doing it all on your own. Okay? You need to know how to access resources. And resources are many varied things, right? Somebody, can you drop in the comments for me? What are some resources that you use? Right? What are some, when you don't know something, you're not quite sure, you get a new project, you're looking at this like, what the, I'm supposed to do this? Or you got a project, it was going well, and then you hit a snafu, like you just hit a snag. What are some of the resources you use? Okay, I know there's like a little delay for when you guys answer, so I'm gonna keep it moving, right? So one of the things that I learned to use, of course, is in research. You can learn to do that as a PhD, but I actually taught my students how to use this is research. You use research. What you don't know, you let your fingers do the walking. Now I know that's from the yellow pages, that commercial that just tells you how old I am, because I remember that. Let your fingers do the walking. It's a snap. Yes, I do remember that. We're gonna keep going. Okay, we're gonna keep going. So yeah, let your fingers do the walking over the internet and do the research. Right? You gotta look at several sources, right? Because just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily make it true. So you got to do several sources so you can compile them and kind of figure out, oh, okay, yeah, this is fairly accurate. Okay. So what else can you use for research? You need to, other than research, you need to understand how to realistically evaluate the work or the project or the task you've been given. And I say realistically because remember, a soloist believes I got to do it all on my own. I have to know it all on my own. But whoops, thought that was off. I did not turn that off. So you have to be to since you think you can do it all on your own, you need to be to realistically evaluate how long something is going to take to get done, right? So for those of you who are PMPs or you have project training, project management training, you understand that hey, if you got a job and it takes 6 people, okay, you can double that 6 people to 12 people, but then your money's going to do this. You got to look at really how long does it take you to do it all versus you using the resources you were given. What are some of those resources? Your subordinates are resources. Okay, and your mentors are resources. Your sponsors may be a resource depending on what field you're in and what they do, right? Your supervisors can be resources to you. Your SMEs, your subject matter experts, can be resources to you. You're not expected to know it all. If you're a project manager, you're responsible for managing the pieces, and the pieces that you manage are some of these things that I've already talked about. You may actually use your fellow coworker as a resource, but only if they're competent. All right, because you know some folks in some of these jobs they really don't know, but that's a whole nother video about how some people get these jobs and they're kind of incompetent. So you don't want to go to the incompetent coworker, right? You leave them where they are. You find a subject matter expert, find someone you trust, right? You may also ask the previous person that had your job before. You know, as long as let's just speak truth to power today, as long as they're not one of those individuals that are scared to death that you're going to do the job better than they did and make yourself look better than them, because they're not gonna play ball with you. I've worked with them before. They're not going to play ball, so you do have to use something else because some folks are just invested in everybody succeeding. Some folks are small-minded, narrow-minded. They have a fixed mindset. They're not going to help you because they think it's taking something from them. So don't trust a previous coworker if they're in that narrow-minded, fixed mindset bunch, right? You don't want to trust them either. Okay. And then also, you can use a coach. That is why so many people hire career coaches. And, why is that important? Because I told you about my situation where I grew up in poverty. So that was a poverty. So one LinkedIn, I'm sorry, yes, LinkedIn user says, thank you for that. Utilize your resources as a project manager. Yes, it's not for you to do everything, but we kind of get caught up thinking that. But absolutely, use those resources, right? And here's the thing: I was telling you that. So for my mindset, because I grew up in poverty, I thought that I had to. I thought it was an embarrassment if I asked for help. I thought it was shameful. And again, I thought it meant I was incompetent. So even when I didn't know how to do something, I did not ask. And at the time, because I was early, it was really early in my career, I didn't even have sense enough to do the research. Of course, there wasn't the internet back in Stone Ages when I first got my first leadership position. But regardless, I didn't ask people, I didn't read up on anything. So the effect was it made me look incompetent because I didn't know what I needed to know, right? So that was a me thing. But let's be fair about this. Imposter syndrome, we're talking about the soloist type imposter syndrome, but this really can apply to all 5 types, right? It's not just a personal issue. Sometimes it is an environmental issue. And that the people who are sitting at the table with you are not welcoming to you. They look down upon you. And if you're an empath like I am, I can sit at a table of folks and kind of know what they're thinking about me or feeling about because I pick up the energy and I pick up the vibes. Right. So yes, I came in with my baggage, but I walked into environments that were not welcoming. I walked into environments where I was the only female or the only black female. And there was this sense of you're inept, you're incompetent, you only got here by a quota, you know nothing, you don't this, everyone there in that case is brand new. Why was I the only person who didn't know something when we're all brand new? Right. And so sometimes the work environment is toxic or it is unwelcoming, which then kicks it back and your imposter syndrome tends to like escalate. So yes, the environment is sometimes a problem and sometimes we carry stuff, but sometimes we don't carry stuff. And we were perfectly fine, but we walk into these toxic, non-welcoming, hostile environments, and we end up developing imposter syndrome because of that. And so really it takes a coach. It takes you sitting down with a coach, going through your stuff to figure out how much of it is you. Like I found out, rather, I didn't know at the time, but I found out that a lot of that was me. But I also found out a lot of that was hostile or toxic work environments, right? And you got to do both. You got to take care of your stuff so you can advocate for yourself. Increase that confidence, increase your self-esteem, understand your value. That's why I work with my ladies so much on understanding your value, your value, your value. Once you understand it, right, you can stand 2 feet on it and advocate for yourself. And understanding that when you advocate for you, you're also advocating for those who come behind you. Right. And so that's important to know. Yes, imposter syndrome is not just an individual. I have the problem. Sometimes it's the environment, right? We call it the racial gaslighting. When you walk into an environment and you're the only woman there and none of the men wanted a woman there anyway, right? And you start feeling some kind of way about that because you're not welcome, you're not wanted, and you start to, feel the effects of imposter syndrome. That may not just be a you thing. That can be your environment thing, right? That's why toxic environments are so really, really bad to hang around in those toxic environments, right? And at the end of the day, right, you just have to use your resources, right? And understand you don't need to invent the wheel. You really don't need to invent the wheel. You had just sometimes you got to be careful. I talked about those toxic environments, right? If you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable asking questions because it makes you seem vulnerable in a toxic environment, that could be true. Okay. And, if you're in an environment where you're penalized for asking questions, asking for help, then you certainly need to lean on your other resources, including mentors and including coaches, because that's what we can do for you, right? The key is understand you need to be confident and you need to be assertive. Those are two keys, right? Something that I used to tell my students, and I taught school way back in the mid 90s. You don't need to reinvent the wheel and you don't need to know everything. Obviously, they need to know some stuff to pass my test, but at the end of the day, that was a finite set of knowledge. You don't need to know it all and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So, yes, I told my students way back in the 90s, mid 90s, you don't need to know it all, right? Why? Because there are two types of intelligence, right? There's crystallized intelligence and there's fluid intelligence. So when we talk about crystallized intelligence, that's the knowledge you're going to get from books, from studying and reading and learning new things, right? It's the intelligence that based on something you previously knew. Some folks call it book learning, if you like me from the South, right? I'm from Alabama. Hey, Alabama. Or we call it book smart. That's your crystallized intelligence, right? But you have another type of intelligence as well. It is called the fluid intelligence. And this is where we have to, we hit an issue or a problem or something, and we got to think outside of the box to solve an unknown problem or situation that we haven't seen before. It's where you have to use ingenuity, not book smart, but ingenuity. You have to think abstractly, right? And that's some folks call it street smart, but you are adaptive and you are flexible. And guess what? You can't get that out of a book. That's the reason why almost 30 years ago, I told my students, you don't need to know everything. You need to know where to access the information. What are your resources to access it? Because being ingenuitive might just be smart enough asking your SME, your subject matter expert, hey, I need, make me smart on this. Anybody that's ever worked with me has probably heard me say that, making me smart on this, right? And that's what I was saying is, I don't know something, make me smart on this. Now, I did work with some trifling folks who wouldn't tell me, but I was like, okay, there are other resources out there. And it always tickled me that when I worked with folks who refused to share knowledge with me, give me about 4 months and I knew more than they did. And then they had to come to me and ask me questions. Whole nother topic there. Sorry, I kind of reminisced there and got off topic. But yes, you have two types of intelligences, and fluid intelligence is where you're ingenuitive, right? And ingenuitive can be coming up with a new way of doing it, or looking over and finding somebody else who can do that for you. All right. Use your resources. Okay. Some days, again, is doing it yourself or figuring out yourself. Some days is tossing it to your resources and asking for help. So today, I want to check over here to be sure I haven't missed any comments. So today, I shared with you 5 facts that you needed to know about the soloist or rugged individual type imposter syndrome, right? And this is a person who thinks they have to know it all and do it all themselves to be thought of as competent and feel like they are not a fraud. That is not true, right? So go ahead and pat yourself on the back because you've made it through week 4 of my 5-week series on the 5 types of imposter syndrome. I'll be back here next week at this same time where we'll be talking about the expert type of imposter syndrome, and that will be the 5th type. And I promised you that I would give you the link where you can go back and look at all of the 3 past videos if you've missed those. Okay, so I'm gonna put that up on the screen. There you have it. It's go to my YouTube channel. You can click that link right there, or you can just Google Dr. Twanna Carter. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my name, Dr. Twanna Carter. Okay, and so if you did find this particular video helpful, or if you see any other 3 and you found them helpful, do give me a thumbs up, give me a like in the comments, and be sure to follow me on YouTube. And that way you'll see all my new videos as soon as they drop. If you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you'll get a link and you'll get a notification every time I go live or post a new video, right? And as well, if you've listened today and you've listened to all 3 rather other previous videos, and something really, really resonated with you, and it's time to get some assistance, and you want to set up a complimentary career solution call with me, all you got to do is look at this link, and I think it's like right there. You can get a free 15-minute career solution call with me, right? Thank you. So I have one of my LinkedIn users said I'm subscribing tonight. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So yes, you can get a 15-minute free. There it is right there. 15-minute free career solution call with me. This call is where I'll go over what your goals are. We're talking about what your goals are. And then I share with you what I do. And then if I'm absolutely certain that I can help you, I'll show you how to get started with the next steps. Okay. But I will be back here next week, same time, talking about the last type of imposter syndrome, and that is the expert imposter syndrome. Take care. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.